Here we go. Okay. Hey, Cindy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Good. Working.
Yeah, working.
Uh,
Uh, I'm on two different Zoom meetings, so I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to be able to do both because it's on my account.
uh-huh.
That's what I'm trying to figure out right now.
Okay.
But but let me add you. I'm going to add interpreter and you're here. Perfect. And you're going to do English to Spanish. And I'm going to start it, okay? We're going to test it out.
Okay.
A ver qué pasa. And then we move. Okay. So Ana, your co-host now, just in case.
Okay.
And then let me go back to, there she is. And I know I have them here.
Oh, yes. It works.
Does it work?
Yes. Don't log off, Cindy.
¿Qué?
No, le digo, sí funciona. It works.
We're
okay, recording.
No,
Do you want to stop the recording?
Oh, sorry. Damn it.
No, it's fine. Is it common in English or Spanish, Ms. Delgado?
It's in English.
So if you're connecting with either your laptop or your phone, I would suggest that you disconnect and connect again. And when connecting, select connect with audio, with computer audio or internet audio.
Thank you, Ana.
Yes.
So I'm back.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Anna Simmons. I am the parent liaison or community relations facilitator for the Sweetwater Union High School District and the State and Federal Programs Department. I support our director that you just heard, Ms. Griselda Delgado. On the screen, you are seeing instructions on how to connect to interpretation and how to connect to the meeting. Bienvenidos a todos. Mi nombre es Ana Simmons. Soy el enlace con la comunidad y los padres en el distrito de Sweetwater, en el Departamento de Programas Estatales y Federales. Uno de mis roles es apoyar al director de Programas Estatales y Federales, a la señora Griselda Delgado, que escucharon ahorita y la van a conocer en un momento. Están viendo en la pantalla cómo conectarse a interpretación desde su teléfono o de su computadora. If you're experiencing problems with audio, when you connect to the meeting, please click connect with audio or call over internet. Si puede ser que estén experimentando problemas de audio al conectarse. Al entrar a la junta, elijan conectarse con audio de la computadora. Y si están llamando de su celular o conectados con su celular, escogerían call over internet, llamar por internet. Es para que les permita escuchar el audio de la junta. Ms. Delgado, would you like to introduce yourself before we start the presentation?
Yeah, welcome everybody. I have been, my name is Griselda Delgado, Director of State and Federal Programs. If you are new to our parent university, welcome. We do start on time at 1 o'clock. So I want to make sure that you understand that we want to value your time and hopefully you spread the word and your friends are coming in soon because we're going to get started in about a minute. Dr. Appel, you want to say anything before we get started and I officially introduce you?
Of course I do. And one of the things I want to say, Ms. Delgado, is what a stunning background you have. That is absolutely amazing. Talking about reaching for the stars, I think you've done that and beyond. So hats off to you. That's absolutely amazing. And Ms. Simmons, same to you. So believe me, I'm going to talk more about than just people's backgrounds, but as soon as it came up, it was like the start of a movie. So very, very cool. And I just want to extend my greetings and salutations to everyone in the audience. Hard to believe we're 2/3 of the way through. Just last time we were only 1/3 of the way through. It's amazing how quickly university goes these days. And I certainly do look forward to a time where we can do this in person. I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I think there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So as soon as we have that opportunity, we can definitely do that and bring you some stuff from UC San Diego to celebrate your achievements. But why don't you go ahead and do the introductions, Ms. Delgado, and then we can power through.
Thank you so much, Dr. Appel. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad we have a solid group of parents who are very in tune and interested in informing themselves and nurturing their knowledge so they can assist their child who is at home during distance learning. And I know there's been so much discussion and so many questions from our parents that you have addressed on a personal level. So we encourage everyone to use the Q&A. Even though we will do Q&A at the end of this session, we do get to, Dr. Appel does get to answer everyone's question, even if it's not addressed at the end of this session. So I encourage everyone, and I'll continue to post that on the chat. Feel free to ask us any questions. Anna and I are here to help on behalf of the district. So we are hearing, just Dr. Appel, before we get started, that this parent university is getting out there and people are talking about it. And I think it's going to be expanded to other organizations too. So more to come on that, but kudos to you, Dr. Appel, because it's all you. We just love the way you teach. You explain things so clearly and simply. And I know this is a very complex topic. So I really want to make sure you understand that we really appreciate your partnership with UCSD and all the certificates that you sent out to our parents. And we are working on the secondary list of participants that fulfilled their certificates because they did the makeup session. We're still working on those.
Well, yep, the makeup session, for those from the makeup session, I actually am having yours printed right now. And Ms. Delgado, thank you for your very kind words. I cannot take all of the credit. It is you, and it's Ms. Simmons, and it's the entirety of the district, and it is our parents who make all of the difference. I'm just here telling some stories. That's all I am doing, and I am certainly, so very happy to be invited into your homes, invited into your communities. And I know an hour is a lot to ask, but I hope it is an hour well spent, because as I mentioned before, at some point we are going to go back in person, and we want to make sure that we put our collective best feet forward. Now, Ms. Delgado and Ms. Simmons, just between the three of us, I got to tell you, I think this is my favorite parent audience of all. So don't tell anybody, right? And definitely looking forward to the opportunity to spread the word and to make a difference. And again, we're here for you for whatever you need. So please reach out at any time. Now, on that very happy note, let's talk about adolescence. So just to let you all know, when we talk about the adolescent brain and we talk about emotions and we talk about all the things we're talking about, you're really getting about a year compressed into 4 sessions. So you are on the express road, and I certainly appreciate all your questions. They're well-informed, they're deep, and they're meaningful, and they cause me to think a lot. So adolescence. We looked at the adolescent brain. We kind of peeked under the hood, and now we're going to take a test drive. And I kept trying to think of a good name for this presentation. And, I was saying, whoa, navigating the maze or charting a course. And then I was walking the dog, and I saw a sign that said under construction. And I went, that captures it perfectly. So I want to welcome you all to Under Construction, a Parent's Guide to Understanding Adolescent Behavior. And you all have a head start because you have some experience, although it is easy sometimes to forget. Again, as always, This presentation and related materials are available at my SlideShare. They're going to be available at the district website. But if you're interested in other elements of neuroscience, if you're interested in arts immersion, and if you're interested in community-based practice, things like that, come on over and visit me at SlideShare, and hopefully you'll find something there that is interesting. We're going to start out the way that we always start out, by paying tribute to this idea of intersectionality between heads, hearts, and hands. And for each of these, in every situation, some may get more attention than the other, but we know that at the middle of this lies high performance. And when we talk about high performance, again, we're not talking solely about academics, although that may be a byproduct of it. We want to make sure that we have teens and tweens and children who grow into adults that feel a sense of solace and a sense of balance, a sense of well-being, and a sense of self-confidence. And adolescence is really where we sort of stake out this claim. And we want to make sure that we look at the brain, we look at behavior. Next time, we're going to talk about motivation for post-secondary education, motivation for college and career. But in a real sense, we're also talking about motivation for going back to school. Now, when we moved from in-person learning to online learning, there really wasn't a lead time at all. It was a jarring shift, and all of us were caught off guard. And we are just now settling into this sort of routine of school from home, and learning how to connect and learning how to manage the home learning environment. But at some point, we're going to go back to our campuses, and we've got to think about what that looks like. And we have a longer runway, certainly, but it is a change, and we know that any change causes disruption. It causes a sense of instability, a break from routine. So we want to make sure that our kids are best prepared for this. And one of the ways that we can do it is sort of look at behavior and get really to the heart of it. Now, I've been doing this for quite a while, and the sentiment most expressed by parents, not just here at Sweetwater, not just in San Diego, not just in Los Angeles, but around the globe, is, I feel like I'm the only one going through this. And I will tell you, if there is intelligent life on other planets, they are dealing with terrible teens and tweens as well. And again, you are not alone. There are millions of parents across the globe experiencing the impacts of adolescence. Every one of you has the same questions and similar degrees of angst. And you are not the only ones navigating this labyrinth of teen and tweendom. You are definitely not alone. My parents had to deal with this horribly obnoxious kid to your right, who barely made it out of high school. The last time you saw me in 1983, this is me in 1982. And I was a kid with a GPA that hovered around 1.0 on a good day. The highlights of my progress reports and report cards was that I was insolent and flippant. On back to school nights, my teachers told my parents that I was a fool and going nowhere. So most of my teenage years were actually spent playing music in nightclubs in the Bay Area. So I was a real handful. And I will tell you, I promise you, it does get better. Now, I don't know if I'm a good example of things getting better, but I will tell you objectively that yes, it does get better. And I am watching my niece and nephew go through the exact same thing, and I am seeing the exact same things. And it all really goes back to brain and behavior. And I know that there are a lot of you out there who look at your children and say, what happened to my sweet angel? Where did they go? Who is this person who is in front of me? And this calls to mind a book called The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which many of you may be familiar with. And a quote from this book by Robert Lewis Stevenson is describing Mr. Hyde. Says, he is not easy to describe. There's something wrong with his appearance, something displeasing, something downright detestable. I never saw a man I so disliked, and yet I scarcely know why. He must be deformed somewhere. He gives a strong feeling of deformity, although I couldn't specify the point. And in many cases, it feels like our kids are dealing with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They're sweet one minute, not the next. And in some cases, your teens are emulating this. And if you are seeing that, and if you are feeling that, again, know that you are not alone in this at all. And okay, now I'm going to let you know that I see the box. I am going to start the share again because for some reason my computer likes to do that. But again, if you're experiencing this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde phenomenon, you are not alone. There are millions of parents around the globe who are sharing your same feelings. Now, again, every time that we've presented, we've talked about this idea of everything being rooted in neuroscience, and it is true here too. Again, I will ask you to take a look at the adolescent brain as it relates to behavior, and we will look at this graphic that looks at the brain's ability to change in response to experiences and the amount such change requires. Now, we're not talking in this case about in an academic sense, and you'll see that there is a little demarcation that says you are here, and this is the age range that we're talking about. Again, the brain is most receptive to change when you're a toddler and decreases until you hit an equilibrium point about age 28, and that coincides with the cessation of the brain's major growth. But what you will see here is that at this age, when we begin early adolescence, you will see increased intensities of behavior and diminished ability to hit the brakes. The last time we talked about the adolescent brain, we talked about it as a Ferrari with a lot of power and a lot of precision. Here it is again, stepping on the gas and slamming on the brakes. You'll find at this age there is a good degree of self-consciousness and need for peer approval. This is what is driving a lot of the behaviors you see. And we'll talk about something called deviant peer contagion, where you will see manifestations of this in action. At this age, remember, this is an age at which we are more impulsive. This is an age where we want more independence. We want to experience life. We want to experience life on our own. And again, it is an odd dichotomy from wanting to be part of a group, a peer group, but striking out on your own individually from your parents. And we'll take a look at how that looks. We'll look at identity development and some of the subsequent behaviors that come out of that. We talk about the rapid development of the limbic system, which is the part of the brain that produces emotions as related to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that dampens emotions. So behaviorally, this looks like a difficulty in holding back emotions and a need for high levels of excitement, because you'll remember that the part of the brain that that is reward centered is stimulated by risk taking. Any sort of risk taking at this age will stimulate the brain's pleasure center. So again, for teens, it's much harder for them to distinguish levels of risk. Some people will say that people at this age feel invulnerable, or they feel immortal, or nothing can happen to them, but that also relates to the brain's pleasure center and acting on risk. So it's important, again, to remember that the brain is still fairly malleable here. And when you want to impact behaviors or set up good behaviors, you're going to want to do it at this age or earlier. And this is not to say that teens should not take risks, but you should be defining the environment in which they take risks so they're not necessarily harmful. I'll show you this graphic that looks at the growth of reward systems before inhibitory systems. So this is the brain's reward system and the part of the brain that dampens reward. And you will see that at this age, there is much more rapid growth of the brain's pleasure center, and you'll see the difference in gray matter volume as you age. So again, this all factors in, and as you think about this, as you think about your adolescent in the time of the pandemic, it doesn't cause riskier behavior. It doesn't change anything fundamentally, but current conditions may exacerbate and magnify things. So you can think of it as a buttercream frosting on an adolescent sponge cake. So it's sort of that extra layer of adolescent angst because of some of the situations adolescents find themselves in, things like not being able to see friends, fear of missing out. So it makes things that much more complicated. So let's take a look at when all of this starts. We'll start with tweens and head into early adolescence. What we're seeing at this age, again, is what we call developmental asynchrony. Now, when we look at human development, when we look at child development, our assumption is that for every year that we grow physically, we should also grow a year cognitively or intellectually, and we should grow a year socio-emotionally. When we talk about asynchrony, we may be talking about a situation where somebody grows a year physically, maybe a year and a half cognitively, but regresses a year socio-emotionally. So things are out of sync. And when we are in the middle of formulating an identity, when we are going through all of these physical changes, this developmental asynchrony can wreak a lot of havoc on not only on the way we see things, but also on the way we behave. And we'll take a look at self-perception in a second, and we'll take a look at sort of the behavioral manifestations of this. When we talk about formation of identity, we're talking about self-concept. Who are we? Who are we in terms of our family? Who are we in terms of the larger community and the larger globe? And self-esteem, which is the feelings we have about our identities. And we know that this changes and evolves over time and does so quite rapidly during our adolescence years. And we'll look at the different stages and when they happen in the next few slides or so. This is a time where there is a struggle between parents and peers, where our adolescents have a desire for both autonomy. They want to do things out on their own. They want to be independent. They want to, strike out and have their own identity. But at the same time, they are looking for fit within a group. They don't want to be completely isolated, but the group that they are looking at are peer group versus family group. Don't worry, I promise you that they will eventually come back to you. They will come around, but this is just an odd time of life when there are a lot of physical changes, when the brain is changing and the brain has a desire for independence. When we look at friendships, and we'll take a look at peer groups in greater detail, but what we're talking about are two things that happen, and they're related to identity formation. One is homophily, which is trying to find your group, trying to find a fit. Some people call it finding your tribe, finding those who are like you. And that is a search that is characteristic of a formation of identity. And then there's homogamy, when you actually find the group with whom you are most comfortable and you feel settled in and you feel protected and you have an identity. And we'll talk about what that looks like as well. I think adolescence and the teenage and tween years are famous for peer pressure. And I remember growing up during the 1980s when they had this is your brain on drugs, and commercials about peer pressure as related to smoking and things. And it's a very powerful drug to fight peer pressure, because it really hits on everything that when we talked about the neuroscience of persistence, it really fires on all cylinders there. We also look at something called deviant peer contagion. This is the transfer of deviant behavior from one adolescent to another. Could be something like aggression, it could be something like bullying, it could be something like depression, but what it relates to is the need of an adolescent to find immediate satisfaction in finding a place to fit in. So mimicking these behaviors, trying to find fit, again, as related to their socio-emotional needs. So already you can see it is going to be somewhat of an uphill battle moving forward. What I wanted to do also is drop in some practical advice that might help you as you move forward with your tweens and teens. Now, it's easy to look at our teenage kids or our tweens as children. I know that when I look at my niece and my nephew, I still see them as 4 and 5, although they are 13 and 14 now. And when we talk about our conversations and communications with teens, we understand that parenting strategies have to change too. Even if you're seeing them as young kids, you're going to have to accommodate adolescence. So this includes speaking to your teens or tweens more like they were adults. And even if you disagree with them, even if you know that the answer is wrong, even if you have the benefit of experience, listen to them, hear them out. The end result is not as important as establishing mutual respect. And oftentimes, if you're getting a lot of pushback, think about your approach and think about the tone you take with them and adjust it. You will see that one of the greatest values that kids have at this age is the importance of feeling respected and feeling listened to as somewhat of an equal. So if you are still communicating with your teens and tweens as if they were smaller kids, you may want to rethink that. Now, let's get on to teens and tweens and stages of adolescence. Adolescence is generally defined in 3 different stages: early, middle, and late. Early adolescence occurs between 10 and 14. And during this period, this is the onset of puberty. This is the onset of awkward physical growth, increased sexual interest. Adolescents in this stage have a limited capacity for abstract thought, but their interests are expanding and become more important. So there is sort of a struggle there where they have intellectual interests that are building, but their capacity for abstract thought is a little bit more limited. They have a limited interest in the future. So oftentimes with adolescents, we'll say, well, think about when you get older. Think about when you're in your 30s or when you're in your 40s. How are you going to feel about that? They're not thinking about that. But although they have a limited interest in the future, they're starting to develop deeper moral thinking during this stage. There is an interesting piece by a researcher named Kohlberg, who looks at stages of moral development and talks about this specifically. So again, they're not really thinking about the future, but they are establishing a moral identity. They are establishing better senses of right and wrong. Now, back to a practical tip. And I know this because again, my niece and nephew will sort of prattle on about things that I either don't understand or don't understand the significance of, things like Fortnite and, things like, 21 Pilots, TikTok. So here we are, Harry Styles left One Direction, and there are a plenitude of perspectives that your teen wants to share. You'll never imagine what happens in the hallway today. Now, we're all busy, we are all overwhelmed, we're all overcommitted, and sometimes, they'll start talking about this kind of stuff, and you may roll your eyes a bit unknowingly, or you may just sort of nod and smile. But I think it's important to know, if your kids want to talk, make it meaningful. One of the things that kids are missing, especially from schools and from teachers right now, is meaningful interaction, the ability to truly connect. So even if it's driving you around the bend, your kids are going to know when you're pandering to them. They have an innate sense ability. When you do notice them, when you appreciate them, when you are listening intentfully, it has a positive impact on identity formation and self-concept. So, even if, you don't want to hear anything more about BTS and who's coming and who's going, it's important that you pay attention. Again, listen, it makes all of the difference in the world. And you will find that sort of the big actions that you take have a more limited impact than the sum total of the smaller things you do. The small things that may seem innocuous to you make a huge difference. So again, sometimes conversation feels like an obligation, but power through it and develop an interest. All right, now let's go on to middle adolescence. Now this is ages 15 to 17. At this point in our lives, puberty is just about completed for both males and females. Physical growth is slowing for females generally, but continues for males. Remember, we talked about abstract thought in the early stage of early adolescence. At this stage, now we are seeing a growing capacity for abstract thought. And an appreciation of long-term goals and an interest in the meaning of life and moral reasoning. So there is a better understanding of the future. There's a better understanding of where one wants to be in the context of the future. It's not defined, but there is an interest in sort of figuring out, what are we doing here? What are we all here for? What is our destiny? However, you are also going to see, despite this sort of wonderful philosophical dive, you're also going to see a number of socio and emotional changes. And we're going to talk a lot about those. But increased self-involvement, they're going to seem perhaps a bit more selfish than they had been, especially as kids, and an increased drive for independence. So you can probably see how our physical growth and our cognitive growth and our social emotional growth is progressing along here. And that is middle adolescence, perhaps one of the sort of more painful parts of adolescence. And then as we move into late adolescence, we're really talking about young adulthood. We're talking about the sort of cessation of physical development, and the development we see is cognitive, more so by leaps and bounds. This is where we really hone and expand upon our ability to think about things rationally. This is where we get delayed gratification. Now, I will remind you, we were in our session on social media. That does have an impact. Collectively, our attention spans are much shorter, and things like Amazon and eBay and Instagram sort of do not help us delay gratification. And that is, when we talk about that, we're also talking about executive function. So I'm going to put an asterisk by there to say, yes, they gain the ability to do it. Will they do it? That is left to be seen. But also you see plans for the future, maybe thoughts about college and a firmer sense of identity, gaining a firmer sense, not necessarily complete, but this is where you see a bit more stability emotionally and independence, because as you remember, during early to middle adolescence, this is the time where our limbic system was going a bit crazy, and our prefrontal cortex just was not doing the job at dampening emotions. But as we grow older and we develop physically, we should see that ability. We should see an increase in executive function, subject to, mitigating factors. Again, the value of listening, and we're all doing 20 things at once. We're trying to finish a meeting on Zoom. We're trying to start dinner. We have to let the dog out and let the cat in. So you as parents, I mean, again, I know you're running a school from your home. You're trying to do your own thing. You're looking after everybody, and certainly most likely not yourself. And I'm going to go return to that idea of self-care as a parenthetical item. But when your teen is keen on communicating with you, that sort of magical time where they actually want to talk to you, when you're multitasking. So when you're trying to get all of this stuff done, what it tells them, it sends them a message that they don't deserve your full attention. And as I mentioned before, it's meaningful interaction is the thing that is lacking. Teens and tweens are reporting at schools. So if they're not getting it at home, it presents a real problem. So try to find some time. Again, early on, I think in our last series, we talked about the importance of, doing individual daily check-ins sans interruptions. Now, here's something. Teens are likely to be at their most communicative in the car and in the evenings. So if you have any way to sort of plan your schedule around that, that sort of incredible time where your teen or tween is anxious to talk to you and see how you are doing, you're going to want to look at times when you are traveling. Now, we've gone through the different stages and we've sort of danced around this idea of identity formation, but let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. And there is a theorist named James Marcia, who in the 80s really looked at this. And the conundrum here was, if I'm not my parents, who am I? And remember, this is an age where you are trying to divulge a separate identity from your parents. And you will see that along the axes here are commitment and exploration. So we can look at something like identity diffusion. And again, these are typically stages in which you come upon a strong sense of self eventually. Now, when we look at this idea of identity diffusion, which is one stage, you will see it intersects almost perfectly between no exploration and no commitment. They don't really have a sense of self. They don't really have an identity, but at the same time, they are not looking for one. They haven't explored what an identity might feel like, and they haven't committed. So they're sort of rolling with the tide. And in some cases, the failure to produce a solid sense of self or a solid identity could prove to produce a bit of isolation. But typically what we do is we move from stage to stage. So we go from a place in our lives in early adolescence where we don't have a strong sense of self, we're not exploring identities, and we haven't committed to one, to something that we call moratorium. And this is where we start to try on identities. Now, trying on identities, you may see, is almost like trying on clothes at this age. So, it may vary from week to week. And this has everything to do with this idea of homophilia, where you are looking for where you fit in. So you're trying to see what fits, am I a scholar? Am I an athlete? Am I a mixture of both? So you're really trying on identities, and there is a bit of a sense of anxiety because you're feeling as though that your environment may not be stable. And what you are seeing is there's a lot of exploration of identities here, but not necessarily a commitment. You're always sort of looking for where you fit. So we went from neither commitment nor exploration to exploring a lot, but not quite committing. And eventually you'd hope that you would wind up at identity achievement. But there's one more element that we call foreclosure. And certainly foreclosure means different things in different settings. But when we talk about foreclosure in terms of identity development, we are talking really about committing to an identity without exploring alternatives. So you can say, my dad was a professor, so will I be as well. So without even, going outside, trying out things on your own, it may be as a result of succumbing to pressure. My mom went to State University and I'm going to go too. Or my mom was a scientist, so I'm going to be a scientist too. So in this case, you will see that there's no exploration, but commitment. You see this many times with gifted and talented kids who will sort of lock on to a profession they like early in life to the exclusion of just about everything else. And they will fight tooth and nail through the rest of their lives to do it because they've committed to it and they don't want to seem wishy-washy. Now, interestingly, you could succumb to pressure. Mom went to state, I went to state, or you could adopt the opposite as a sign of rebellion. So, my dad's a professor, so I am going to not go to college at all. So you commit to an identity without exploration because there is an imperative, an internal imperative to do so. So this cycle usually happens throughout adolescence, where early adolescence is generally characterized by diffusion, middle characterized by moratorium, early and middle perhaps by foreclosure, depending. But eventually you get to a point where you have identity achievement. And this is where you sort of find your unique and true self. After trying on many hats or trying on many outfits, you find one that is uniquely you. So you can imagine, on top of all of the physical changes, on top of all of the neurobiological changes, you have sort of this painful search for identity. And, I think it's made a bit harder by the pandemic, in that we really don't get a chance to go out and socialize as much. And that is a really very important part of our identity formation. So this, you can think of an overlay on top of some of the things we've been discussing. Safety and trust first, another practical piece of advice. Now, when your teens and tweens go out of the house with their car keys in hand or the house keys in hand, your natural impulse, the natural impulse of educators and the natural impulse of parents are rescue behaviors and helping behaviors. So you want to call out and say, make sure you call me when you get there. Make sure that you drive safely. Those are sentiments that should absolutely be expressed, but it may not be the last thing you want to say to them as they go out the door. You don't want your tweens or teens to feel as though you don't trust them. So this is not to say don't tell them to drive safely or don't tell them to call, but think about when you are doing that. And it's important, if they've shown you that they can be trusted, until they've shown you otherwise, trust that they're going to live up to your expectations. Believe it or not, although they are, more attuned to their peers at their time, they still value your opinions, they still value your respect, and they want to be able to please you as well, although they will never show it, and they will probably say just the opposite. So when you do bid them adieu with love and bite your tongue. If you want to tell them to call, or if you want to tell them to drive safely, give them some time. Let the last thing they hear walking out the door is that you love them. Very important. So here we go. The wonderful menu of common behaviors in adolescence. And I always have so many parents who will say, I'm the only one, that this must be happening to, or this is so uncharacteristic. I know this is something to worry about. Well, let's look at some common behaviors in adolescence. And I will say I got a perfect 100 score on this as an adolescent. Number one is lying. Not lying for the sake of lying, but lying to avoid negative consequences, lying out of fear of what consequences might emerge. Arguing. You may wind up arguing about the most inane things. But this is a way for them to assert independence. They may be arguing just for the sake of arguing, just because they want to, be able to stand up to you. Same thing with defiance, acts of defiance. You will also find that there are awkward phases. This usually coincides with elements of physical development, and they are time bound. So it is not a lifelong awkward phase. Usually when you're searching for an identity and you're going through sort of these odd physical times around 13, 14, this is when you would see this. This is where even if they have a great big, a wonderfully large group of friends, they feel self-conscious and that they don't fit in, even though they probably do. Abandoning commitments, giving up, that has to do a lot with prioritizing, sometimes a bit of forgetfulness, but usually, with all of their dealing with, they tend to give up rather easily. This will come back. Don't worry, make sure that you reinforce the importance of commitments, but abandoning one or two may not be so bad. You will also see withdrawal from family. Remember, this is a time that is friend-centric and peer-centric. You may find that they have an attitude, I think is the best way to describe it. And to quote DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, they just feel parents just don't understand. They don't understand what I'm going through, even though you as parents have lived through it. Some of you not so long ago, they just think that you don't know what it's like to be this age. You haven't had to be this age before. The impulsivity, we talked a lot about this. This coincides with brain development. This coincides with sort of the risk centers of the brain. Academic problems. Now, again, this is something that you should keep an eye out for, but you shouldn't be surprised if you see these emerge during adolescence, because again, it's a matter of setting priorities. They're dealing with physical changes. They're dealing with social-emotional changes. They're dealing with cognitive changes. So sometimes academics is not going to be at the top of their list. And again, remember that when you go from fifth grade into sixth, or if you're going from sixth grade into seventh, sometimes it's not great to be the smartest kid in the class, just the way school society is built out. Curfew violations, you will probably see these, and in addition to them wanting to go out and do things, a lot of this is boundary testing. They're seeing just how far they can push envelopes. Again, a piece of practical advice about trying too hard. And we know that you have wonderful intentions here, but sometimes we want to get our kids talking and they don't want to talk. How was school? Fine. What did you do in school? Stuff. Well, how was the stuff you did in school? It was fine. Forced conversations are not the best strategies, and it feels really artificial to those on the receiving end. So if you are asking about hallway gossip, or if you're asking about the latest TikTok, it may seem artificial. So it really has to do with finding good organic opportunities to share and solicit advice. Not necessarily having them tell you about their days, maybe you sharing your day, maybe you soliciting advice from them. What that does, it shows that you care about their opinions and that you are also human, that you can offer up just a bit of vulnerability that proves empowering to tweens and teens. This idea that they can help you with a situation or give you advice goes a long way. And again, We know that you do it with the best of intentions, but really try not to try too hard. Back to some other common adolescent behaviors. Don't be surprised if you see them. Low impulse control. We've probably talked about that to death. Increase in appetite. That is more of a physical thing than anything else. But, you know, you always hear these tales of teenagers eating parents out of house and home. Don't be surprised if it happens to you. Lack of frustration tolerance. So having a short fuse, blowing up quickly. Some of this may be hormonal. Verbal aggression, again, some of this may be hormonal, and you've got to be vigilant because there's a difference between different types of verbal aggression. And if it becomes habitual, it's really time to put a nip it in the bud. A concern about physical appearance. So this is where kids become a lot more self-conscious. They're looking at themselves in the mirror a lot. You know, they may not be satisfied with what they see. They are pickier about the types of clothes they're wearing. In some cases, they may be looking for the brand items and things that make them immediately stand out and fit in. Sleeping longer and more soundly, that has to do with the circadian rhythms that we talked about the last time, but don't be surprised. It's not necessarily something bad if your teens are sleeping longer. Selfishness, again, this relates to identity. This relates to some of the neuroscience of the adolescent brain we talked about last time. Your teen may seem more selfish. Again, this is a phase that they grow out of, but really everything at this age is inwardly focused, especially in early to middle adolescence. So don't let that trouble you too much. Low self-esteem, even if there is no reason to have it, it's a sort of endemic at this age. They have a greater interest in privacy. They want to keep thoughts to themselves. So no matter how much you shared when they were smaller, or even if you do have those wonderfully bright moments where you have your teen sharing with you, they have a greater interest now in privacy, and they want to sort of keep things close to the vest. You will see frequent changes in relationships. This could be frequent changes in dating, frequent changes in friendships, something certainly to keep an eye out for, but don't be surprised because remember, your teens are trying on different identities, different hats, as it were. Another practical piece of advice, you know, as parents and educators, we're programmed to engage in helping behaviors and we want to step in. And sometimes we have an idea of what's coming and we want our teens to feel comfortable. So we laugh before it's times, or we'll jump into a teen story and say, well, when I was your age, this is what I did. We got up to some hijinks as well. Again, you know, you and your teen have a different dynamic. So it's really important. Remember when we talked earlier about being heard before being reassured? It is very important to be a good listener and offer the same level of respect to them that you would for a good friend. You wouldn't necessarily jump into their stories or cut them off. Listen and hear, do both. Again, it goes such a long way when you do those kinds of things. A lot of us are concerned about low motivation. This is a question that I get all the time, and it happened to the best of us. We've all had these instances of low motivation in adolescence. Sometimes it has to do with biological changes and the priorities associated with biological changes. Remember, emotional concerns are predominant. So if they're not necessarily focused on schoolwork, that might be a reason. Making the adjustment to elementary to middle to high school is often difficult. So think of the school environment and what it takes to make those adjustments. I mean, think if you had to take on a new job every 4 years and get used to a new way of doing things and new people. Social and peer pressures, what's cool and what's not. We talked about being the smartest kid in the class. Sometimes it's not viewed as such. Shift in self-perception. This has to do with self-esteem as well. So we shift from a growth mindset where we can take on the world and learn everything to perhaps a fixed mindset where we are a little bit more doubting of our abilities. Shortest attention spans, we know social media does not help this. So in adolescence, our attention spans are short and growing ever shorter. unrealistic expectations and underdeveloped work ethic. So this is all about, you know, what we expect from school. This is what the amount of effort we're expected to put in. And as things get tougher academically, we find that we have to put more work in. So it's really important, again, to cultivate a work ethic, a good metacognitive sound habits of mind. Where do you need to start worrying? When you see extreme changes in weight, either loss or gain, or extreme changes in appearance. That's not to say that people are going to try on different identities and, you know, they'll dress a little bit differently. But if it's becoming very extreme and incredibly frequent, problem. Insomnia or ongoing sleep problems. So if they can't get to sleep, or they have trouble getting to sleep or staying asleep. Rapid or drastic personality changes. Again, this is not the typical developmental identity that we're talking about. Sudden and constant changes in friends. We know friends change frequently, but if it is all of the time and the types of friends they are seeking out are not good for their mental or physical health, it's time to be concerned. Persistent academic failure. So as it's getting worse and worse and worse, versus gets bad, picks up. Suicidal talk or ideation or self-harm. Substance use or abuse beyond experimentation. This is an age where we're experimenting with substances, but when it becomes an issue of abuse or constant use, important to attend to that. Violence, bullying, threats, cruelty to animals, fantasizing about acts of violence, and run-ins with the law. So all of these things are warning signs where you would want to step in. Another piece of advice for you, choosing activities. I know that we all want our kids to follow into our footsteps, and we want them to love the same kinds of things that we loved. And if they don't, we just don't understand it. I wasn't, but you know, you can imagine that parent saying, well, I was a football player in high school and I want my son or my daughter to do this. And I don't understand why they don't have the same level of enthusiasm. Do not live vicariously through your adolescent. It's a bad idea for so many reasons, especially because they're finding their own way and they're hardwired to seek independence. This is a key to healthy identity formation. This is not to say that they shouldn't be involved in something, but it should be something that fuels their passions and gives them opportunities for success. So no matter what that is, make sure that you're supportive of it. But again, they should be involved in something. So that's where you can put on your sort of parent badge and say, okay. And again, it's also very important to find balance. So we're not talking about being involved in everything. Some other words of advice: serve as an example of what you'd like to see. Set lofty goals and provide a pathway toward achieving them. So it's not enough to say, I want this for you, or you should. Help them create a pathway, which sometimes means steering them towards appropriate classes and activities. But make sure you get their input. Find out what interests them. Offer support strategically, offer support smartly. Doesn't mean hover. What it means is when you sense they could really use a hand, they probably won't come to you. Make sure they understand that it's on offer. Use a strengths-based approach and build upon them. We talked a lot about this in the Brain Compatible workshop, as well as the Adolescent Brain workshop. Communicate with teachers and schools as warranted. Again, I'm not talking about helicopter parenting, and I'm not talking about, you know, if you read an article, you know, find the teacher, knock at their doors, or you know, contact them by Zoom. But in cases where things aren't clear, especially these days, you know, if expectations aren't clear, if there's anything that you have questions about, make sure that you reach out. Maintain realistic expectations. Love them for who they are, not what they do. And sometimes it's easy. I mean, that's an easy thing to say, but again, it's also easy to lose the plot. And be patient. Please be patient. This will pass. You see anger. Best way to calm down an angry teen is to remain calm. Sometimes it may seem like that it makes them angrier. But you want to make sure that you address issues in the moment, and you want to encourage them to address issues in the moment rather than pushing them down and bottling them up, because they will blow up later. So if there's a small thing, take care of it. Lying and concealing, we know that this is fairly typical teen behavior. So when it comes to this, pick your battles, and offer up open communication, being as non-judgmental as possible. This is not to say let them get away with anything and everything, but let them know that you love them and you will listen to them, you will hear them out, and you are there for them. Teens will lie, but if you yourself can offer honesty and truth, they may find that they don't have to do it as much. Indecisiveness is natural during the adolescent years. This is also a great time, we know from our work in brain compatibility, to introduce decision-making skills. Decision-making skills does not mean you make the decision for them, but really introduce strategies from deciding among many criteria. And when we look at college going next time, we'll take a look at how that comes out. Arguing in defiance, make sure that there are rules and consequences for breaking the rules. Be clear and be firm. And one of the ways that you can mitigate any of the negative impacts of being clear and firm is to involve your tween or teen in the process of developing rules. So this is the idea that you solicit their opinion, you solicit their buy-in. This does not mean that they make up the rules, but they do have input into rules and consequences. Finally, create and maintain open and trusting relationships. Roll with the punches. None of us gets this perfectly right, either as kids or as parents. Be empathetic. Put yourself in your teen's shoes, not literally put yourself in your teen's shoes, but try and think back when you were going through adolescence. Now, I remember when I did, and the times were very, very different, but I remember how it felt. And I remember the sense of confusion I felt. And from day to day, I felt, like a different person. Make sure you respect them. That respect will come back to you. Let it float away and it will come back to you. Seek and offer help and encourage help-seeking behaviors. Tweens and teens do not like to seek help, but you want to encourage them to seek help when they need it, because this will help if they wind up going to tutors and teachers. So make sure that there aren't anything negative associated with it. And remember, they're struggling for independence, so they're not going to engage in these behaviors. But you can surely find examples of where even the most independent and forthright of people do so. But again, the key to all of this, beyond sort of understanding the brain and navigating the socio-emotional maze, is to show them that you care. Always show them, always find some little act to show them that you care, because it's the little things that count, not the big drastic sweeping actions, but it's the little things that add up. And make sure that no matter what, you love them and they know that you do. So I am going to ask Ms. Delgado and Ms. Simmons to come back to see if we have any questions about these adolescent years.
Thank you so much, Dr. Appel. Oh my gosh, this has been an amazing presentation. Where were you when my kids were adolescents? Oh my gosh, I would have used some of your advice here, but we all struggle as parents and we do the best we can, right? And the most important part is to love them no matter what. But we do have a few questions, and unfortunately we're running out of time. So I'm going to go ahead and start asking some of these.
Let's go.
Let's go. This is coming from Rosario Herrera. Her question is, how can we obtain peace of mind that when our kids are growing up and find themselves in difficult situations, they will take into account the values we have taught them? Will make and how will they make good decisions regardless of peer pressure?
And that is a difficult thing, and I know that my parents struggled with that too. So Rosario, you are definitely not alone. again, I think it's important to remember what your teens are projecting outwardly may not be exactly what's going on inside, because they're putting on brave faces and independent faces outwardly to assert their independence. But you can rest assured they will always come back to those values that you've taught them, and they will use them in situations where they have to make decisions. And when we talk about time to make good decisions and spending time on things like indecisiveness, you can always return to those core values. And what we know about, from our brain compatible learning class, the more that these values are reinforced, the more likely they will be to sink in and be sort of the automatic response. So believe me, when your kids are being confronted with peer pressure and forced to make a decision about going one way or another, there is going to be a struggle between the values that you've taught them and the immediate need to want to impress. And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the values you've instilled that will win, because they are so deeply ingrained. And one of the things that we can certainly do when we send out the Q&A is to talk about some strategies you can use to make sure that these values are communicated, and strategies that when your teens are forced to make these kinds of peer pressure decisions, that they're well armed to do so, and what can they do so they don't feel compromised. So definitely, Rosario, very good question. Trust in your kids, trust in the values you've instilled.
Thank you so much, Dr. Appel. We really appreciate your information. We do have more questions that I wish I could address, but like you said, we're going to send these questions out to you and you can answer them, and then we'll send it out to everyone so they can all have the benefit of seeing these responses. I did launch a survey. We're trying to get more data from the participants to make sure the information was relevant and it's something that they want to hear more about. Our last session next week, we will have another survey so we can start generating topics that are coming up next. So for our next session, for our third session. So thank you so much, Dr. Appel. If you want to take another question, we will, but technically
Sure.
It's over.
Sure, I'm here.
One more question that maybe this will be an easy one, I think.
Okay, let's hope.
Regarding the attitude slide, because they have a lot of attitude, teens have a lot of attitude.
Mm-hmm.
How do we not take their attitude and what they say to us personally? I think you said that don't take it personal, but as a parent, how do you not make that personal?
It's hard not to make it personal, especially because when you look at them, you can imagine them in a swaddling cloth, you can imagine them in the crib, and you're thinking, who is this person and where did all of this come from? And, the thing about teens is they know exactly where people's Achilles heels are. They know exactly which buttons to press. So, in it, as hard as it might be, just remember what you were like at that age. Try to find a degree of empathy, and really what you can do is remember that it's not necessarily them or it's not necessarily you. It is the biological and socio-emotional changes that are part and parcel of what goes on at this age. This isn't to say that you should take abuse by any means. And if it's getting to that point, you can certainly have a talk with them, but just remember that it's probably not you. It's probably what they're reacting to are things that have been building up, and including crises and self-esteem, things that may have happened to them during the day, and you are just the unfortunate target. You were just there. And again, you will find that it's almost like a roller coaster. So that, that teen who stood in front of you in a very standoffish way and saying just horrible things, 2 hours later may come wandering into the kitchen with a big smile. So, you know, just remember that it's something that happens at this age. It happens to us all. But certainly you want to be able to talk with them about behavioral expectations and ways to channel their anger, to channel their energies. And I can certainly provide some advisement, some strategies to do that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Appel. And that question came from our D-like president, by the way, Guadalupe Estrada. That was a great question, I thought, because we do take things personal, and it's so hard to listen to our kids sometimes insult and say things, demeaning things. And
awful.
Some of us, yeah, it's very difficult.
It's awful. I've never had a question from a president before. So
Oh.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Guadalupe, for that great question. So I thank you, Dr. Appel, for being here. We, like I said, we're gonna send these questions out. Please, I encourage everyone to be here next week for our last session of our spring series. We will have a survey for you to inform us as to what our next topics should be. I think these topics are great, but again, we take the topics from the needs of the parents. Thank you so much, Dr. Appel.
Thank you. And thank you all at Sweetwater and beyond. Please do send me your questions. I'm here waiting for them, so send them along.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
See you
you.
next week, next Tuesday at 1, same time, same place. Let's see. I'm going to stop the recording.